Guys, we're on to round 2 of the NHL Playoffs of 2023. We've had a crazy round 1, and what better way to start our round 2 preview than with one of the least expected matchups possible, probably, and that is going to be the Florida Panthers against the Toronto Maple Leafs. When you look at these teams, you look at Toronto, first time in 19 years advancing to round 2. And then you look at Florida, one of the biggest upsets in NHL history, taking down the Boston Bruins, who had the best regular season record ever. This series should be epic.
It's going to be a good series. I mean, I'm very excited for it. Two very high scoring teams going at each other. It's going to be a very fast paced hockey series, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, it should be some fast hockey. So what we're going to do for you guys today is we're going to break it down. We're going to go through both these teams. We're going to see how the offenses compare with each other, the defenses, the goaltending, and the special teams. And then after that, we're going to give you our final prediction on how we think this series will go. And we're going to start off here with Toronto and their offense. You look at this team top to bottom and you're like, wow, this is a really, really strong roster. Particularly with their big four, Nylander, Matthews, Marner, and Tavares. These guys, all basically point-per-game players. Even Tavares on like a down year, and Nylander has had a career year. I mean, like these guys are all over 80 points. It's kind of insane.
I mean, yeah, Toronto is well documented that they have very good hockey players on that side, but we can't like overlook what's on the other side, and that's the Florida Panthers. I feel like with that series win, one of the biggest upset in NHL history, this team's going to be driven. This team is motivated. They have a very high morale, even higher than Toronto, in my opinion. And with guys like, when you have a Matthew Tkachuk on your team, this guy can change a series. And we saw that against the Boston Bruins.
Actually, both these teams' offenses were flying. Both were getting contributions from multiple lines, too. It wasn't just the top line going for either of these teams. Depth scoring, I mean, when you look at Florida, guys like Luostarinen, Lundell were chipping in even. Obviously, Matt Tkachuk had an amazing, brilliant series with 11 points, right? Just crazy stuff, like hard carried that team. Barkov was really getting his game back a lot. Like, there's a lot of offense on both these teams. This should be quite the high-scoring series.
It's a very different. But for me personally, I feel like Toronto knows the Tampa Bay Lightning really well in the last series, and I feel like both of those teams are very similar in their own ways. So I feel like they're mirror image of each other. They're built very similar in my opinion, but this Florida team is very different. There's no players like Matthew Tkachuk in this league. There's really very rare. It's the only comparable is Marchand. He beat Marchand in the last series. This guy can change a series. I'm telling you, this guy is physical. This guy can piss you off. This guy will probably piss off the whole first line on this Toronto team. I wouldn't be surprised if this first line in Toronto doesn't do a whole lot in this series. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when I look at these two offenses, it's very different to me. Toronto has, in my mind, the skill advantage offensively with just ability to score goals. But Florida's forwards, their two-way play is fantastic. Guys like Lundell and Barkov, known really well for their two-way play. Barkov's been nominated for the Selke before multiple times. This guy is an elite two-way forward. Tkachuk is getting better at it, actually, quite a bit too. And like Cohen says, the Florida forwards are quite physical. That might be a little bit of a difference compared to the Leafs forwards, who are more finesse and more about skill. So I say, like, offensively, I give a slight advantage to the Leafs, but it is pretty close.
Personally, I would give the advantage to Florida Panthers. I like their team, their forward group a little bit better than Toronto. I like Toronto's forward group. I like what they added. I like Ryan O'Reilly up there in the third line center. He can definitely move to the second line center. This is exactly what they needed. A solid two-way center. I like Noah Chari. I like some of the bottom six players that they have. Not a fan of Kerfoot personally, but the team is very good. We will see how Bunting does in this series. I feel like he's going to be one of the X factors for the forward group for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But yeah.
Yeah, next on, let's move to the defense here. So this is kind of crazy. When we started in round 1 talking about these teams, we didn't think that either of these teams necessarily had amazing defenses, but you know what? Both defensive cores played really well in round 1. Looking at Toronto, Morgan Rielly was just absolutely insane. Probably the best series of his career. Actually, not probably. It was definitely the best series of this guy's career. Absolutely fantastic offensively and defensively. Guys like Jake McCabe for Toronto really stepped up big too. This guy was used in a lot of shutdown situations with TJ Brody, and that pairing really did quite good. And then looking at the other side for Florida, Brian Montour, same type of thing as O'Reilly. This guy was offensively elite, scored 5 goals in that first series to basically help Kachuk the two of them just destroyed Boston. It was amazing to watch. And then also the pairing of Forsling and Ekblad was really good for shutdown.
Yeah, this is very interesting comparison here. I personally feel Toronto has the better unit of 6 defensemen. I like Jake McCabe, but I would say this. Brandon Montour is the best defenseman in this series between these two teams. No questions asked. He's better than Morgan Riley. I'm sorry.
I don't know if I'll go quite that far.
He is definitely better.
He has definitely had an amazing year, phenomenal year.
He is phenomenal. Just the speed, the confidence that this guy. I feel like this player Montour was sheltered by the last coach. He was like a diamond in the rough. No one knew Montour was this good until the way Paul Maurice utilized this guy. He is a legit number 1 defenseman on any team to me.
Yeah, when I compare these two defenses, I kind of agree with Hohen in the fact that I think the top-end defensemen on Florida are a little bit better, but as a unit, Toronto has, I think, a better defensive unit. They have the ability to run out 6-7 guys if they want to. As long as whatever they do, they just don't bring back Justin Hall to this defense, I think they'll be okay. A guy that really needs to step on the back end up for Toronto a lot more, though, has to be Mark Giordano. We love this player. We talked about all year. Fantastic. He did them such a solid with his contract, taking that huge hometown discount, and he played really well this year, but he had a very, very rough series against Tampa Bay, and he's going to have to really turn it around and be the Giordano we know in this series.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I like the way Florida Panthers played against Boston. They were pressuring them every time Boston touched the puck.
All right, now we got to take a look at the goaltending here, because this is two goalies who have kind of been in the doghouse in the past, especially in past playoff series, but really rose to the occasion in round 1. Ilya Samsonov versus Sergei Bobrovsky. Wow, 2 Russian studs here. These guys have been on and off throughout their careers. They've had highs, they've had lows, but both of them really stepped up in round 1 and looked to be quite close, to be honest.
To be honest, I don't like both of these goalies. I don't think both of these goalies are that good. I'm going to be honest with you. But if I had to pick between the two of them on who I like a little bit more, who I favor a little bit more, it's going to be Bobrovsky. I feel like this guy has the experience. This guy has played on teams that have been in deeper playoff runs. Samsonov is like a unproven player right now to me. I feel like he has played in some playoff games, but the quantity is nowhere as much as Bobrovsky. I know Bobrovsky doesn't have good history, but he looked really good in that Boston series, the way he closed it out, and it's gonna be interesting to see who rises on top.
Yeah, Bobrovsky definitely has a lot more experience. He's been inconsistent at times as well, but he looked really good against Boston. As a Caps fan, I've seen a lot of Ilya Samsonov in the past. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. It's a bit of, you don't really know what you're going to get. You kind of saw that in the Toronto series. This guy had games where he looked like he couldn't stop anything, especially that Game 5 where he let in a couple soft goals too. But then that Game 6 performance was one of the better performances I've ever seen out of his career. He absolutely shut the door on that team, only allowing 1 goal in a pivotal Game 6. I really like this guy, and I think it's honestly pretty close to on par. I don't really give the advantage to either team on this. I think it's a pretty big wash. That leads us to the special teams here. I think this could play an absolutely massive impact in this series. We saw when Toronto's power play was clicking, they were absolutely dominant. And when Florida was scoring power play goals, with Montour and Kachuk in front of the net, they just had such options there. And I think this series could come down to whose power play clicks better.
Both units are really, really good. Both teams have high caliber players, and when you have Alexander Barkov, which in my mind is like a top 3 center in the entire NHL, and then you have also top 5, and then on the other side you have Austin Matthews and you have Mitch Marner. It's like a ridiculous this is a really good matchup, honestly.
Yeah, both teams love to run their power play for like a minute and 20 seconds out of the 2 minutes. They try not to have to get them off if they have the energy to stay on, because they're just absolutely loaded. Both these teams feel like they can score at will on the power play. We saw that in the first round too. They look very good. So I think it's going to come down to discipline a lot. If you're not taking penalties in this series, you're probably going to have the advantage. All right, Hohen. We're going to do a little thing here. I want you to pick one X factor from each team. And we're going to start off with Florida. Who's your X factor for this series that could make a difference if Florida's going to win?
It's going to be Matthew Tkachuk. I know I'm picking the best player on the team, but it is going to be him. It's the scoring is driven by this player. The bloodline of this Florida Panthers offense is ran through Matthew Tkachuk. I'm sorry, it's going to be Matthew Tkachuk.
It is. He did hard carry that first round. He played amazing. I'm going to say for Florida, I think the X factor is going to be Aaron Ekblad. This is a weird one maybe, but this guy is known to be a number one defenseman for multiple years. He had a really solid year last year. He kind of took a step back this year. I noticed his defensive play against Boston was pretty solid, but he's really going to have to bring it. And the reason I picked him is I think of all the defensemen, he has that big body and that big frame, and he's going to really have to be blocking shots and being very physical with those Leafs forwards if they want to have a chance in this series.
Yeah, my Leafs X factor is actually going to be Michael Bunting in this series because the way he plays, he's kind of like a pest for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he better not take any suspensions. He better be a good boy, and if he does it the right way, actually this team has a good chance.
You know, I actually really like that one. I was almost going to pick it. So I'm going to go with Matthew Nyes instead. The reason I like Matthew Nyes to be an X factor in this game, we really don't fully know what we're going to get out of this guy. He's 20 years old. We've got to see him now in 6 playoff games pretty much, and he had a really solid series. I mean, the coach liked him enough to promote him in the lineup. What I like about this kid's game is he is very, very aggressive, very physical. He's not afraid. He is like a true power forward in the making. Sure, he's young, but I mean, this guy's got a big frame, and he's going to be that type of guy. We talked about how the forwards and the defensemen on Florida, pretty big guys, very physical. It's going to be guys like him that need to really bring the heat if they want to keep up with these guys physically. But that leads us to our final predictions here. I think overall this is going to be a very tight series, and I'm going to have to go with Toronto in 6 games. How about you?
I'm going to go with Florida in 7.
All right, well, I'm glad that we're on different sides. Yeah. Healthy competition. Maybe we'll bet a beer on it. We'll see. But guys, until next time, we'll see you in our next preview, and have a great day.
Take care.